It's clear that some businesses, including my business, and the city and state governments really needed money from the federal government during COVID to keep people employed, to keep businesses going. But it's also, I think, clear that more money was pumped into some of these places than was actually necessary. So I guess the first question is, do you agree with that question? And what have we learned about this, especially with regards to inflation and the budget? So who wants to take that first? Steve?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you read some of the debate between what's happened, during COVID, and you go back and look at what happened during the financial crisis, you sort of had these debates where, the argument is made that the financial crisis was worse and longer than it needed to be because the government was too timid, it took too long, it did too little. And so I think that both the Congress and the Federal Reserve took that lesson to heart. And so when it came time for COVID, they did too much, too soon, and too long. And, as a result, we're seeing, massive increases in debt and deficit, massive increases in the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which has contributed to inflation. You can sort of parse, how much of inflation is due to, COVID lockdowns, how much of it is due to the Ukrainian war. Obviously all of those have contributing factors, but I think there's also no question that the Federal Reserve kept interest rates too low for too long, and that also has contributed to inflation. And so, there's this trade-off that public policymakers face all the time, and how do you balance the desire to do good without having unintended consequences? And it's an almost impossible question to know, because we can't run a counterfactual. We don't, in economists, we always like to say, well, all other things being equal, if you did this is what would happen. But, all other things are never equal. And so, if you look back into history, or you look into current events, it's just hard to know, whether we did too much or too little the last time. How much worse would it have been? How much better would it have been? Nobody knows, because we can't rerun that experiment. And so when we get to the new crisis, the COVID and the Ukrainian war, did we do too much? And I think there's an argument to be made that we did.
Great. And anything there?
The Fed is doing the hard work now to get inflation down, and that's raising interest rates, which is painful, and running down the balance sheet. I want to add that, and it's part of why we're here today, taxes and spending cuts are going to have to occur to right the ship. If we spent too much, then we can raise appropriate taxes, and of course the loaded word there is appropriate taxes, to basically claw that back. But that is something that we do need to do. The economy, some of the charts that Phil showed are deeply concerning, but none of the deeply concerning parts have to happen if we will make the hard choices.
If I can add to that a little bit, and I'm going to go back to my accounting roots here. In accounting, we are taught very, very early on, I believe it was the very first class, that revenue minus cost equals profit. So, and then this is an identity. You cannot mess with this. So we can control any two of the three things, because the third thing is automatically given once you've fixed two of those three things. So far, the way the US economy has worked is we have kind of done revenue separately, we have done cost separately, and let the deficit be the floating factor. And we have seen the results of what that happens. If in fact our goal is to get the deficit number kind of controlled, then like Anne said, revenue needs to go up and cost needs to go up less. Ideally go down, but at least go up less. And how we raise revenue, where we raise revenue, from who we raise revenue, these are very thorny, difficult issues. Likewise, how and where we reduce costs, whether it be in Social Security or whether it be in Medicaid, these are very complicated issues that involve trade-offs. And trade-offs are ultimately at every level, there is a fair bit of politics and values that are involved in making these trade-offs.